Hi everyone, welcome back to Almost Normal. I'm feeling a little bit lost recently, and I don't mean lost as in what the fuck am I doing with my life, though I do also feel that too, but specifically at the moment, I'm feeling a little lost in identity. A couple days ago, me and my husband had possibly one of the biggest conversations humankind can have. We opened up the conversation to starting a family together, to mix his DNA and my DNA and bring forth another human being that is part him, part me, and that we are fully responsible for. I feel like basically our whole relationship, we have been talking about having children. And I've always been 100% for it. 100%, I want children, I want to be a mum. If I'm going to be totally honest, and this is going to sound strange because everyone I've said this to has reacted in a very odd way, but initially, I wanted to have a kid because being pregnant, having a human being inside of your body, growing another human in your stomach, and I know it's not your stomach, I'm just like generalizing the area, okay? That just boggled my mind in such a way that I was like, I can't live without understanding what that feels like. Like, I wasn't even really considering the fact that there would be like a child at the end of it that I would have to look after. I was mostly obsessed with understanding how that phenomena may feel. Having a big ball on you all the time that you cannot just detach from your body and put on a table for a while. Like, it is just one of those things that boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. I have no other way to say it. And so, honestly, from whenever I started feeling that I wanted children, and I think that went beyond my husband, like probably before I was having these thoughts before I met him, I was not really thinking like, oh, I want to be a mummy. I'm a mom. I'm a mommy. Mamacita. I was not thinking this. This was not my initial thoughts. My initial thoughts were like, Jesus Christ, how must that feel? How must that feel? Like, I feel like I need to know how that feels. I also feel like I need to know how it feels to push one of those mothers out of your vagina or like get it heaved out of your stomach, you know? I just need to know. I like, you know, that was my biggest inspiration for having children. Not the actual child itself, just the sort of experience of growing it. A lot of people said I should probably just be a surrogate then because there are not that many women on this planet who want pregnancy but don't really think about the child just yet. This makes me sound so bad, like I do want a child now. But initially, it was very much just a curiosity thing, like how does that feel? How does that feel? I must know. And now that it's sort of a reality, now that it's sort of something that could genuinely happen, you know, now I'm afraid. Now I'm fucking terrified. I spoke to my therapist the other day. She was like, it's totally normal. The realities of life heading towards me like a fucking freight train, and I don't know what to do about it. But it's interesting, the thoughts that come up when you have those big life conversations. And one of them for me, and this has been something that I've been thinking about for such a long time, and I feel I'll never stop thinking about it, but I just feel like it's important to discuss it because I feel very pressured by having an identity, having a brand, let's say. And I have gone through so many different versions of myself. And I think that one thing that really sprung to my mind when discussing children was the fact that I really feel like I don't have a proper identity. I think the real thought of bringing a new person into this world, a new creature that I will have to be responsible for, I think that quite real notion has made me reflect so much on the old versions of myself and has made me think about all the versions of myself that I have not yet been able to let go of fully. And I think I got very emotional the other day when this conversation became real because I became aware of the fact that there are versions of me that I will absolutely have to let go of. And I will have to appreciate them from a distance. But I cannot hold on to the ideas that I could still one day be this person again. Because some versions of myself just do not align with the idea of motherhood. And a lot of them do, but there are some that just don't. And I feel that if I hold on to these people as strong as I am now, and then I make big life decisions that'll sort of remove me so far from who I used to be, but I'm still holding on to them as strong as I am, I think I'm going to find that really, really difficult. And I think I'm going to yearn for the past too much. And I'm someone who thinks about the past a lot. I also think about the future a lot. High anxiety. I am pretty much always thinking about the future. But I don't want to be a mother and be so yearnful for who I used to be, because that leads me to not being present. And the one thing that I know that I want to be when I am a mom is being present, okay? I don't know shit about shit. I don't know shit about anything, okay? I have no idea what motherhood is like. Absolutely no idea. Couldn't tell you. Couldn't tell you the first thing. But something that I want for myself anyway, and so I feel like I will absolutely want when I rein a child in, is to be present, is to enjoy and be grateful for the things right in front of me and not be yearning for the past or worrying about what's to come. I really would like to eliminate that as much as possible. Before I got sober, doing drugs and drinking was basically my identity. Being a party girl was pretty much my only identifying feature. I had no other hobbies except for picking up drugs, sitting in my room alone at 3 a.m, talking to whoever would answer my calls, trying to figure out what bars to go to, and making friends with very questionable people, mostly strange men on the streets at nighttime. Those were pretty much my fucking hobbies. I kind of had a uniform. I would wear all black pants, a little black top, black chunky boots. I don't know if that was an intentional thing or I just was so numbed to how other people perceived me that I just gave not a lot of thought to what I was wearing or what I was saying or what I was doing or who I was hanging out with. I really didn't consider other people's opinions of me that much. And that is true in all senses, because I also was a terrible friend, a terrible girlfriend. I thought the world was all mine, and I felt like I could treat people however I wished. And if those people didn't want to walk by my side anymore, then I would villainize them to the ends of the earth, okay? And that was pretty much who I was as a person. My identity was going to parties. I found out after, once I got sober, that a lot of people would just hang out with me because they knew that I would be out till 5 a.m. That was the only reason they felt like they wanted to hang out with me. And, you know, that hurts, but like, whatever. What the fuck did I expect? I wasn't a good person. I was definitely not someone you would like want to go and have coffee with a lot. I was probably too hungover to go get coffee. That was just who I was as a person. That sort of like encompassed me as a whole human being. And I lived like that for a while because I was just so numbed to whatever was going on. So numbed by alcohol, so numbed by the hangovers that I just didn't really give a fuck. And identity was not really something that I considered too much. I really felt like I had it all figured out, which is beyond insane because like, what the fuck did I have figured out? I had absolutely nothing figured out. I thought I was the coolest motherfucker. I listened to the best music, fucking SoundCloud rappers and like high school rock. Like that was basically all I did. All I did. And I was depressed and anxious, felt horrible, but at least I didn't have to think about who I was too much. When I got sober, it felt like I had to rip my own skin off, okay? I could no longer do any of the hobbies that I was into. I couldn't pick up drugs. I couldn't get blackout wasted. I suppose I could still call people at 3 a.m. and chat about nothing, though without the cocaine, I was pretty tired by like 9 p.m. to be honest. And yes, I guess I could go to bars and pick up strange men, but like
honestly, that sort of booze blanket, that sort of like courage juice, without that, doing that is pretty hard and actually fucking terrifying. Yeah, so, all of the hobbies that I had sort of collected over the years, I couldn't really participate in them anymore. I was also no longer numbed to the idea that people perceived me, people could see me. I was very much aware that people made opinions about who I was. And arguably, that was one thing that I really didn't enjoy about getting sober. I mean, there was actually a lot of things I didn't enjoy about getting sober, but I think that caring about what people thought of me was something that I really, really didn't think about too much before. I mean, if I was thinking about how people thought about me while I was acting the way I was before I got sober, like, I don't even know what I was thinking. Like, I don't even know, like, what did I think people were saying about me? Did I think people were saying good stuff? Like, there's just absolutely no way that I had any notion that outsiders were looking at me and making opinions. Like, I couldn't have even had that idea. Definitely not. Like, when I got sober, it really came crashing down. I was no longer numbed to anything. I could see eyes on me at all times. I just knew that people were making observations about me. I would go to parties, okay? I would try and push myself to be the party girl without the party favors. And it did not fucking work. It did not work, okay? The people I was having conversations with were actually not interesting at all. They were talking very, very enthusiastically about what vacuum cleaner they used. Those conversations fall pretty fucking flat if you are not taking any powders. Like, trust me on that one. I felt naked. When I went to parties, usually I would make up some bullshit because I had the confidence to just make up some shit. When I got sober, I would go to these parties and I realized that I didn't have shit to say about shit. People would go in to the bathrooms together and I knew I couldn't go and I felt so left out and I felt like I had just completely lost who I was and I did not know what the fuck I was going to do with my life. I felt so uncool, this big. I felt like a tiny, 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 tiny person that people could just squash under their shoes. I just felt like the lowest of the low. Like, who am I without the drugs and the partying? Who am I? I don't know. It was definitely that way for a while. After a couple weeks of being sober, I decided to pull myself from this hole in which I had put myself down. And I decided to start painting. It's something that, as a active alcoholic, whenever I went to parties and people were like, hey, what do you do? I would always say I was a painter, and I wasn't. It was very odd. I would always say, oh, I'm a painter. Yeah, I'm a painter. And people would say, oh, can I see your work? And I wouldn't have any work to show them. And it was just like always very weird and awkward. But once I got sober and once I had my faculties slightly back, I was like, why don't we just give it a go? Why don't we just like see if I actually could be a painter? It's a little bit like that episode in Friends when Joey writes out a resume and there's a bunch of shit that like he absolutely does not know what to do. And then he tries to learn how to speak French because he wrote that on his resume. And he's like, I would like to be able to do at least one thing that I say that I can do. That was pretty much me. I was like, maybe I can try. Like, I've been saying that I'm this for so long. Like, let's see what happens if I am that. So I sat in my then boyfriend's garage for about 6 months and didn't speak to anyone and just painted and painted and painted and painted. And, my clothes started to get a little bit more colorful. I started to be a little bit more cutesy. I wore less makeup or whatever. I had paint all over my body at all times. I was listening to much more soft music. I was wearing overalls and I was just, prancing around in the sun and painting. That was sort of who I just naturally became after. Then I started to go on social media and I started to film my process of painting. And then that was sort of me introducing myself a little stronger into the social media world. And I felt like I needed a bit more of an identity there. So then I started to really, really think about the outfits that I was going to wear while painting because I wanted, to have a presence. I wanted to have a brand. So I really spent a lot more time than I ever had on what outfit am I going to wear for this particular painting. I would try and sometimes match the outfits to the paintings I was going to make. And that kind of became an identity for a while. Then a couple years later, I decided I want to go to art school. So I applied to go to art school and I got in, very, very surprisingly to me, honestly. And that was sort of the start of another version of myself. And that was an art school student. And you would think, oh, surely that can't be that different to what you were when you were painting, but it was. One major thing that happened was I started to take anti-anxiety medication because with the drugs and the alcohol, I was definitely self-medicating. I was sort of, numbing my anxieties and OCDs and everything I had with whatever I could find on the streets, whatever I could find at bars. And without that, my emotions became very, very heightened, and I really started to realize how bad they could get. And so I started taking anti-anxiety medication with a lot of umming and ahhing about that because I had always heard bad things about it. But, I was like, it can't be worse than what I'm feeling now. So I started taking some anti-anxiety medications. And whatever, they started to make me feel better. One thing they started to do was they made me gain a little bit of weight. And this is not a bad thing. This is a very natural thing, especially if you're recovering from some sort of addiction, okay? Because food and looking after yourself is not really on a priority when you are addicted to certain things. And so it was the first time ever that I was actually sort of caring for myself, probably eating better, not throwing up everything in the toilet because I just felt too sick and my body was just like rejecting any type of food, okay? I just started to relax a little bit more. I wasn't running around on the streets every single night trying to find the next party. I was sitting at home. I was able to be with my own thoughts without needing to be on the move at all times. And I started to gain a little weight. And when I was growing up, I had a very image-obsessed household, I would say. My mom was and remains a supermodel. My dad was and remains a fashion photographer. And so as you can imagine, being skinny, being a certain body type was pretty important on the scale of priorities, to be honest. It was pretty high up on the scale of priorities in my family. And, I was sort of a naturally thin teenager, and I'm sure the endless nights out probably helped with that. And so when I started to gain weight for the first time ever, I did not have the tools to deal with that. And I was also unaware that it was okay. And it was probably a good thing, where my body could function like as a body should function. And so when this happened, yes, I did not really have any tools to deal with it, to deal with my body changing. I felt very, very uncomfortable. I felt like I was living in someone else's body. This was around the time I started to go to art school. And the next version of myself was definitely a combination of different things that were happening. But one was the fact that I was gaining weight. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't understand my body. I didn't understand how to love myself properly with this sort of new figure that I had. That also mixed with going to art school and feeling really just not like I belonged there at all. I just didn't feel like I belonged, and sort of seeing all of these people, how they dressed, how they did their makeup, how they dyed their hair, what music they listened to. I was sort of overwhelmed by how uncool I felt, to be honest. Just super, super insecure. And so I started to just sort of adopt the looks that I saw. I dyed my hair all different kinds of colors. I bleached my eyebrows. I started to wear really bold makeup looks. I really spent a lot of time thinking about my outfits, really pushing the boat out, really stepping outside of my comfort zone. And I think that was definitely a reaction to not understanding how to deal with my body changing. Again, combined with going to an extremely progressive art school, extremely. Just not something that I had sort of been surrounded with so intensely before. And I felt like I had a little bit of a difficult time transitioning into that. And I'm so happy I went to art school. I mean, I'm still there. Actually, I have one more year left. It has taught me so much. It has taught me so much about love and acceptance. And I will hold on to those feelings for the rest of my life, and I'm so grateful. But I think initially being thrown into that, I just didn't know what to do with myself. And so I felt a little bit like I was wearing a costume, I have to say. I felt a little bit like I was really, really trying. You know, it did not come naturally to put those outfits on. It did not come naturally to do those makeup looks. It didn't come naturally to dye my hair different colors. Those are things that I really had to think about. And I did that for a while. I started listening to the music people were listening to, and I started to get really into it. And I started to talk different. I started to have a different dialect almost because I wanted to sound smart, you know, and I just felt so out of place, so out of place. And I did this for a while. And then eventually I think I just got fatigued. I got absolutely fatigued. And without me even really thinking about it, I just started to go to school every day in sweatpants. And every weekend I would just spend in gym clothes. And I didn't really do anything other than that. I just sort of stopped caring. I stopped thinking about who I was as a person. You know, I made art and I went to school, you know, I had some friends, I just didn't think about identity. And honestly, it was kind of relieving. I just didn't feel like I was being myself. And I think that I felt much more comfortable just waking up, putting on a pair of sweatpants and going to school. And but eventually I started to feel like I was again losing myself a little bit because, you know, all right, maybe I was sort of relaxing on the try hard front, but it was almost teetering too much the wrong way, where I just wasn't looking after myself again, you know, wasn't washing my hair. I wasn't really happy with the way I looked. I just accepted it. I was, you know, so over the color gray, but it's all I wore. I don't know. I just went so far the other way. I had tried for years so hard, I think, that I just got so tired. And so I got really, really used to literally never putting dresses on, never doing my makeup, never looking kind of like cute, never really feeling happy with myself, but also not bad about myself, just sort of like whatever, like a sort of floating entity, I would say. And I wanted to snap out of that. You know, that happened for a while. I would say at least a year. And I really, really wanted to snap out of it. I would also say that seems, or I feel like that was probably the time in which my anti-anxiety medications really started to make me very tired. And I almost felt slightly like a zombie version of myself. I could not sit in the mirror and do like a full face of makeup. Like, no fucking way. I couldn't even think about, you know, wearing a pair of jeans. It was sweatpants or fucking nothing, you know, sweatpants and slides. And I just wasn't really focusing on myself. And in the beginning, it was fine. It felt almost relaxing. But after a while, I was just like, God, I feel unexcited, okay? I don't feel excited about anything at the moment. Not even just about the things that I was wearing or my makeup. I just felt unexcited about everything, to be honest. And I still feel like I didn't really accept how I looked. I didn't feel like I had fully accepted myself for who I was in that time. Again, very little tools. I really didn't have anyone to tell me, oh, like, you look beautiful now and you should just feel happy because your body looks like that because it's recovering. And that's a wonderful, beautiful thing. Like, you don't have to look heroin chic to be beautiful and to be accepted. And it took me a really, really long time to learn that. And I feel like I am still learning that today. And now I feel like I'm sort of in that confusion again. I think a lot of it comes from my increase in being on social media over the last couple years, or even just the last year. I've been posting a lot more on YouTube. I've been posting a lot more on TikTok. I've been following a lot more creators in a way that I hadn't really before. You know, now I sort of aspire to be some creators that I follow. Before, I sort of just looked at content in any way that I felt I wanted to. I didn't really feel connected to specific people I saw on the internet, and now I do. Now I feel like I glob on. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but I feel like I sort of connect myself way more intensely to people I see on the internet than I have before. And I think that really confuses me because a lot of these people's aesthetics, a lot of these people's, you know, lifestyles and stuff like that, so different and really sort of like, what's the word? conflict with each other. And so I'm trying to be this person one day, I'm trying to be this person the other day, and then I'm trying to be this person the other day. And I feel like I'm not trusting in myself to make decisions for me. Like, if I like that dress, I'm going to wear that dress. If I want to listen to that music, I'm going to listen to that music. If I want to do that hobby, I'm going to do that hobby. I think at the moment, I'm a bit like, oh, well, she wouldn't do that hobby, so I don't really feel like I want to get into it. And I get very, very confused, and I'm up and down, back and forth all the time, because it kind of probably depends on who I wake up and whose TikTok comes up first, you know, in the morning before I get dressed. That's probably what I base my day on. And I would love to get out of that. And I don't think that's the cause of my confusion. I think it's just a byproduct of the confusion I'm having. I think I just am a little bit unsure about how I would identify myself right now. And I think with that space, you know, the fact that it's a free area in my brain, I'm sort of filling it with other people. And I think it's totally fine and totally great to feel inspired by people, even people you see on the internet. I think, you know, it's not always bad. They're called influencers for a reason. You know, they influence people, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But I think right now what's happening for me is I'm not feeling like I'm being influenced by them. I'm feeling like I want to be them. And that's not healthy, because at the end of the day, I'm never going to be anyone else but me. And if I can't accept myself, for me, if I can only accept myself once I like somehow do some witchcraft and like evolve into a different human being, like if I'm saying, oh, that's the only time I'm going to be happy, then I'm not going to be very happy, because it's never going to happen. And I think, you know, I'm just like, what do I wear? What do I like to wear? What is sort of my style? Do I need a style? Maybe I can switch it up all the time. Maybe I can switch on my music taste depending on what I'm feeling. It's hard to remember. I wonder if there was this sort of confusion through each transition into each different version of myself. I wonder if I've always been having these thoughts and I just don't quite remember. I feel like I have. And I feel like maybe I'm just sort of in this transitional moment right now. And I think that having big life decisions like having a kid can really make you think like, who the fuck am I? You know, how am I going to influence this child? I don't even know who I am myself. And that's a scary prospect. And maybe I was sure of myself before, and now I'm like, God, do I have to really figure it all out before I procreate? I don't know. Am I allowed to switch things up like after I make children? Of course I can. Like, I'm pretty sure that's totally fine. I'm pretty sure people change careers when they have kids. I'm pretty sure people change locations when they have kids. Like, I think that I am just sort of future tripping so much, and I'm like, maybe I have to figure out exactly who I am now so that I can sort of remain stable. I can sort of remain the same. And I don't think I have to remain the same. And I think that these anxieties are coming from many different places. But I think something that I am anxious about is my inability to sort of let go of old versions of myself. Like, I, you know, in particular, miss the girl I was before I got sober. I miss, you know, the sort of out there version of myself I was. I miss the people I used to hang out with sometimes. I miss the hobbies I used to do. I just miss how carefree I was in those days. There are things I miss. And everything I did before I got sober absolutely does not align with being a mom. It doesn't. I think the only thing that I can really take from that, and the only thing that I should remember from those days, is not to make the same mistakes again. And I don't want to yearn for those days anymore, because, you know, your brain is super strange and it really romanticizes the past. And I know the past has been fucking brutal to me. Like, I am under no illusion if I really think about it. But for some reason, on the surface, if I think about who I was before I got sober, I'm like, I kind of miss that girl. I don't miss that girl. And I you know, I need to figure out tools to let her go. Keep the lessons, keep the memories in some form, but I find myself yearning for her sometimes, and I don't really want to do that, and I don't want to live in the past that much, you know. Then the version of me painting in my studio, you know, can I hold on to her? Do I want to be her again? I can't be her again if I have kids. I'm not going to be able to spend hours and hours on end alone in a garage by myself listening to music and watching YouTube videos and making paintings. Like, I'm just not going to be able to do that. Not day and day, not every single day, all day, you know? I'm just not going to be able to do that. The version of me going to art school, that was like a youthful time. It's exciting. I was going into classes, meeting people I'd never met before. Like, I'm not going to be able to do that either. And I think that I wasn't going to be those versions of myself ever again anyway. But I think just like the idea of having a child is scary to me. And I, wonder, did I do those versions of myself right? I don't know. I'm stuck. I'm stuck right now. I'm a little lost. Who do I want to be? What career do I really want? What kind of friends am I looking for? And I think that I am convincing myself that I need to make all these decisions now, but I don't. But I just felt like I needed to vent and get that off my chest. I feel like one day I can be a hippie girl, one day I can be a punky girl. I think people do that. Anyway, that's kind of all I had for today. A little bit of a reflective episode. I'm trying to change things up a little bit with the podcast, and I very much want it to be more of like diary entry style. So I think I'm going to do 2 episodes a week, smaller. Shorter, 2 short episodes a week, as opposed to 1 long one. That's sort of my idea right now. But anyway, I'm just thinking about identity, I'm thinking about who I used to be, who I am now. Who am I now? I don't know. Do I have to decide? I'm not sure. Don't think so. Maybe having a child will create a whole new version of myself without me even trying. I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of all I have for today. Just a little, what's on my mind episode. I hope that's okay. But I really love you guys. And I'm excited to see you next time. And if you haven't subscribed, please make sure you do. It's super helpful to me. And you can see anytime I post anything. So yeah, I really love you guys. And I will see you next time. Okay, love you. Bye.